The Saints fall 26-9, and everybody hates Pete Carmichael. And I'll just be honest, probably deservedly so. And this is going to be a quick game reaction, so I'm allowed to have hot takes, and I'm allowed to have responses that maybe aren't as measured as normal because we don't have the All-22 yet. We'll get that tonight. But what I will say, early on, just personal opinion, just right now, just me saying things how I feel, Pete Carmichael cost New Orleans another game. We're going to talk about it today. We're going to do our normal quarter-by-quarter reaction as we tend to do here on this channel and here on this podcast. Welcome into the Who Dat Confessional podcast. I'm Rev Deuce, and I'm here to cover the New Orleans Saints here with y'all. Let's give a shout out to those who are here early. Appreciate everybody being here. Aaron Luke, thank you. Swamp, Wild Ant, let's see, Ada Youngin, love to see it. JH, Derek, Drake, Aaron Alvarez, Huncho Smooth, Doc for the win, etc. Lance Lang, appreciate all of y'all coming in. So here's how the format's going to work. One, y'all need to share this out with your friends and family because if you don't really love me. Two, we're going to go quarter by quarter. So save all of your questions for the second segment here, and we will go question by question. We'll be grabbing a lot of what y'all have to say. And third, real quick, normally I tell y'all this is the film study we're going to do, or I'll ask y'all for the film study. Tomorrow, I'm telling you right now, the film study is going to be based on third downs and Pete Carmichael's play calling tendencies. Tomorrow's film study is on Pete Carmichael. Tomorrow's film study is on whether my reaction right now that Pete Carmichael should be benched and Ronald Curry should be the play caller is justified. We'll see if that's the case in tomorrow's film study. So don't say, hey, Rev, can you tell me why Chris Olave is not getting the ball? No! I'm going to tell you why Pete Carmichael is either good and I'm an idiot, or how he sucks and everybody else is right, and that's tomorrow's film study. So prepare thyself. I'm not looking forward to watching this game tape, but I'm going to do it for you because I love Who Dat Nation. So let's start the game off for how it actually began. The New Orleans Saints struggled early on, and you did see Derek Carr not look 100%. Here's what I saw from a player evaluation standpoint. When it comes to playing quarterback and evaluating quarterback, I will not attest that I'm an amazing scout for quarterbacks. The positions that I do the best in when it comes to scouting, O-line and D-line are probably where I would say I'm the best at. But that doesn't mean I didn't have training for quarterback. Let me tell you some of the things that I saw. Number one, when you see passes tend to sail high, especially left to right, that's an upper body mechanic issue. Oh my God, what a shock. He has an AC joint sprain. But typically what happens is when you're emphasizing the upper body, emphasizing the arm, you're going to tend to overthrow and sail versus having all that momentum rise up from the ground and throwing from a proper base. What I am basically saying is it felt like early on Derek Carr was kind of overcompensating with his throws, leading some of them to go kind of high. And I didn't really see that get fixed until very late in the game. First quarter, I thought the offensive line looked better. Andres Pete looked really good at right guard, leading me to actually tweet that I believe Andres Pete should be the starter. Even when Cesar Ruiz rolls back, Pete should be starting at left guard, and then he ended up getting a concussion. So I jinxed it. Apologies, Saints fans. Blame Rev. That one's on me. Also saw the Bucs looking to test Lattimore early. Obviously, Mike Evans will leave this game, but early on they were testing him. Nola was winning the time of possession in quarter one, but it was a little misleading because New Orleans only converted 25% of their third downs. Hence why tomorrow's video will be focusing on the style of play calls that Pete Carmichael is making. That is not winning football, and that's how time possession can sometimes be misleading, even though it's a category you almost always want to dominate into. Let's continue on to our next one. In the second quarter / first half, the Saints defense was allowing the Bucs to complete 70% of their third down. So I do believe that the offense is the reason this team is losing football games. But at the same time, this needs to get called out. One thing Dennis Allen has struggled with over the previous few years against teams like Tampa are those middle of the field mesh concepts and those middle of the field plays where he's targeting his nickel guy. And you saw Chris Godwin go off again. Chris Godwin finishes today with 8 receptions for 114 yards. And this is not new to Saints fans. They've seen this before, and Dennis Allen has seen this before. Now, I will not say I've changed my mind. This is still a top 10 defense in the league. And you can't expect the defense to be perfect every game because the offense needs to do something. But defensively, there was a struggle there, and you saw it early on, and you wanted to see them adjust. New Orleans ends up finishing the first half with 29% of their third downs completed. Not very good. Questionable play calling by Carmichael throughout the first half. Critical 2 plays by Adam Prentice, both the fumble after the interception and then dropping a sure first down of a pass that ends up leading to an end of possession. So those are critical moments. That ended up costing New Orleans. Now, they only had 4 penalties in the first half, but all of them came in the second quarter, and that also became an issue for a team trying to bounce back. Leading in the third quarter, Alvin Kamara and the offensive line looked much better. I said for a long time that this offensive line needed to return to its outside zone roots, and it needed Alvin Kamara and a growing Kendre Miller to do that. Just as I predicted, I'll pat my shoulder for one thing, the offensive line looks significantly better today. And through the third quarter, Alvin Kamara was averaging over 5 yards per carry. The outside zone run, obviously effective, and then Kamara being that next level player, taking it to the second level of the defense quite regularly. Love to see it. Hopefully you get more of that into the second half of this season, the middle of the season. Carmichael did better between the 20s in the third quarter. I give him credit for that, but still failing in the red zone. This is one of the worst performing teams in the red zone this year and last year. So people saying that like to hate on Derek Carr, like, oh, he's struggling in the red zone in Oakland. Well, guess what? So did Andy Dalton. So did everybody else under Pete Carmichael. Seems to be issue, though, Pete. I'll save all that griping for just a second. Olave finally gets the first catch and his only catch of the game in the third quarter, and it goes for a paltry 6 yards. And then let's talk about how the numbers finish. Michael Thomas ends up being your leading receiver in terms of yards. A mind-blowing stat by Alvin Kamara, 13 receptions for 33 yards. I've never seen a stat line like that. 2.5 yards per reception. That is not something I'm used to seeing. And here's what that number tells you. I always talk about how analytics can't tell the entire story. Here's what that Alvin Kamara stat teaches you. And let me go ahead and add another little bullet into my Pete Carmichael chamber. If you're only averaging 2.5 yards, here's the only play that you're being asked to do as a running back in the passing game. Swing. That's it. Swing out the backfield. No pivot/whip routes. No Texas concept. We saw Pete Carmichael. And again, this is what's so frustrating because he has a couple of these great plays that he did well in the beginning of the season. No Texas concept for Alvin Kamara out of the backfield, even though Chris Olave ran the same thing 2 weeks ago. And then you gave the look with Rashid Shaheed, never pulled the trigger. So, okay, you should not have a man catch the ball 13 times and average 2 yards per reception. That's literally a negative play. All right, we're there. Once again, that's why tomorrow's film study will focus on play calling and what the situations were. And maybe it is all Derek Carr. But defensively, you also did not have the pass rush getting to Baker Mayfield throughout the first half. A little bit better in the second half due to some increased blitz packages that Dennis Allen was calling. But Brian Brzee / my man Breezy, 1 sack. It's the only thing that the defense was able to manage. Did not see the effectiveness from Carl Granderson, Malcolm Roach. A couple of upfield rushes that forced Baker Mayfield out of the pocket. But then the New Orleans Saints had a really bad tendency of letting Baker run for big yards. He finishes the day, Baker Mayfield that is, 8 carries for 31 yards, and that's including him kneeling to end the game. So he was averaging over 4 yards per scramble attempt against the New Orleans Saints defense. Pete Warner ends up being your leading tackler. I thought he had a fundamentally strong game, but he's not flashing either. If we're going to draw some negatives. And finally, some team stats, and then we'll get into y'all's comments. New Orleans finishes today 36% on third down. Now, credit to Dennis Allen. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers went from converting over 70% of their third downs to ending the game at 53%. They converted less than half of their third downs in the second half. That was a nice improvement. But New Orleans allows Tampa to go 3 for 4 in the red zone, the only fail being the interception by Isaac. And then they ended up, every time they got back down there, allowing a score and 3-3 on goal to go. You can't win football games like that. Scrolled on down, New Orleans passing game averaged 3 yards per. Paltry. Not winning football games like that. Other side of the field, gross punting average. I know I'm grasping at straws, it feels like now, but I've been having this beef for weeks now. Gross punting average was 40.5. New Orleans continues to have issues with its punter flipping the field. And when your offense is playing as bad as it is, that is a tremendous issue, in my opinion. Bring back Blake Gillikin. There are your overall numbers. We'll start getting into some of your reactions as fans of what we're seeing. Aaron says, absolutely pitiful play, and I'm not here for the yeah buts. Each player should feel embarrassed by their performance. I would say, yeah, it's pretty bad, but I'll be honest. My gripe isn't with the players here. And maybe that makes me a bad analyst. But I'm sorry, maybe I am blind, but I look at this team and goes, too much talent. I go back to coaching. This is an issue. Like, I don't think this is on Derek Carr, right? Again, I've said this before. Derek Carr is being paid as the 13th highest quarterback in the NFL. 13th. Derek Carr, the New Orleans Saints did not place expectation on Derek Carr to win football games single-handedly. They did not pay him like a top 5 quarterback, and they do not believe in him as a top 5 quarterback. All he has to do is be decent. And he's not been as good as he was in Oakland, but he's not been bad either. He's definitely been the better quarterback. But still, play calling. And if that's going to be a problem, it doesn't matter who your quarterback is. I'll say it boldly like this. Drew Brees would struggle right now with Pete Carmichael. And let me be very clear. We have proof of this. There is proof that Drew would struggle. How do I know? Look at 2012. Do we forget? Now, I'm not saying that Drew sucked in 2012. He made a Pro Bowl. He threw for 5,000 yards. But did you know that Drew Brees led the league in interceptions? Or do you remember that Drew Brees led the league in interceptions in 2012? Do you remember that the lowest completion percentage of his career as a New Orleans Saint came in 2012 under Pete Carmichael? Now, Drew's still a Hall of Famer, right? Drew still did well. We would kill for that Drew Brees right now. But the point I'm making is a Hall of Famer in the smack dab middle of his prime had his worst statistical numbers with Pete Carmichael. At what point do we simply accept the problem is the man up in the box and not whoever they're signing for X amount of money a year? Now, again, I'm not trying to say that the players on the field aren't making mistakes, because they are. And we call those out in our film studies. Check out the Saints film room every week. But how often do you look around and see consistent problems here and there, and that becomes where you put the blame? Travis says 2012 defense caused a lot of that. 2012 defense causes problems. Absolutely. Absolutely. 2012 defense was terrible. Drew had to play from behind. That's fine. But how about this? That's not the only year they finished 7-9. That's not the only year where the defense was trash. Right? Look, just a couple years later. That's why I hit on the fact that Drew led the league in interceptions, because it wasn't the only time that the team had the worst defense in the league. And yet Drew didn't do that in those years. Here, to back up my points, I'm not just talking out my butt, because I really do feel like this is a Pete Carmichael problem. 2012, the New Orleans Saints defense was 31st in points allowed. That is deplorable. That is disgusting. That is gross. That's absolutely gross. 2015, they were the 32nd team in points allowed. 2015, quite literally, the worst defense in the NFL. In that year, New Orleans Saints quarterback Drew Brees with Sean Payton calling the plays, threw for 68%, 5% better than 2012. He threw for 5% TDs and only a 1.8 interception percentage compared to 3% in 2012. So you had a worse defense in 2015. I mean, not by much. We're still talking astronomically bad defenses here. And Drew performed better. At what point do we look at Pete Carmichael and go, you simply suck at play calling? At what point do we do that? That's just how I see things. Good to see everybody in the chat, by the way. Always good to see our Saints fans. Aaron says, wasting elite talent, heads need to roll. I agree. My solution, by the way, to the Pete Carmichael problem is roll the dice with Ronald Curry. Roll the dice with Ronald Curry. You had Ronald Curry call two games in preseason, so you're already evaluating him, looking him out. Roll the dice and give it to Ronald Curry. And here's the worst thing that can happen with Ronald Curry. He's just as bad as Pete Carmichael. But at least with Ronald Curry, there's an argument to be made for him to grow and get better. We know exactly what Pete Carmichael is. I don't think after 20-plus games, we are going to change our opinion, or we're going to suddenly believe that he's a different person. Ronald Curry, give him the reins. Give him a shot. That's my quick reaction hot take following this game. Give Ronald Curry the play calling duties. The absolute worst he can do is be equal to Pete Carmichael, and the best he can do is be better than Pete Carmichael. I do not believe the New Orleans Saints with Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Alvin Kamara, Kendre Miller, 4 first-round picks on the offensive line, Derek Carr quarterback, can do worse than 3 field goals against Tampa Bay. I absolutely cannot believe it can get worse than what you're seeing right now. Give the play calling duties to Ronald Curry. Lance says fire Pete. If Pete wouldn't take a demotion, I'd fire him. Truly would. But I'm not in control. Aaron says, do you think we'll be okay moving forward? And do you see a change coming at OC? And who do we turn to if we were to do that? My bet is Ronald Curry. Look, I have no issue with Dennis Allen's play calling defensively. I do think that all the faults this team currently has fall on his shoulders because he is the head coach. No matter what, everything is Pete Carmichael's fault, but that also means it's Dennis Allen's fault. So he's in charge of making this be better, right? But at the same time, who do you switch him with? The only option you have if you're the Saints is either Ronald Curry or Doug Marrone. And you're not going to go bring in a coach out of college, NFL, or unemployed into the season in week 5. Here's why. Because they're not going to come in and just pick up the offense that's already here, and you don't have time to create and install and complete new one. The only option you really have is who's in-house. Here are the people in the Saints coaching staff who could call plays. And this is going to be it. So hear me out. Ronald Curry, who's your passing game coordinator and your quarterback's coach. And then you got Doug Marrone, who's your offensive line coach. Nobody else. Cody Burns does not have the experience to do it. Not that I have any issue with Cody Burns. Jari Evans, who's your offensive line assistant, does not have any ability or experience that we're aware of. Clancy Barone is not somebody that I would throw up there to do that. He's your tight ends coach. And I wouldn't give it to Joel Thomas either. The only options are the hardcore, been in the league forever veteran of Doug Marrone, or the much younger, potentially better, we'll see, in Ronald Curry. Now, with Doug Marrone, remember, he's been an offensive line coach and a head coach his entire career, and he was the offensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints from 2006 to 2008. So he was in Pete's job under Sean Payton before you had Pete Carmichael. I would just run it with Ronald Curry. But your only option is in-house. Your only option is in-house. But I think if you're New Orleans, you're 2-2. And here's why it's so critical. Because we are seeing how much the NFC South stinks, right? Atlanta loses in London today to Jacksonville. Carolina loses and blows a big lead against Minnesota. The only team with a positive record now is Tampa, and I still think that the Saints can win this division. You've got to make that change now, though, early on. If you continue to roll with things as they are now, I just don't see you being any better than what you've seen. And at some point, don't you get tired in just bathing in mediocrity? But let me get more of the comments from chat. Edwin says, do we honestly believe the Saints will drop Pete midseason, even if they believe play calling is an issue? Edwin, I believe that Dennis Allen feels like he should have to, because if he doesn't, the pressure's on him. Because, look, Mickey Loomis is a GM who will give a guy time, but he's not going to give you an unlimited leash. And if you have another losing record this year, the hot seat is real. So absolutely. Do they believe in Dennis Allen? They do believe in Dennis Allen as a head coach. Will they believe in him consistently losing? No, they won't. So yes, I do think could happen. Do I see it happening? Man, I'm giving you a quick reaction following a game, but I do think it's a legitimate possibility. Let me get into some more of these questions. Carl says, fire everybody. Pete is just a symptom, not the disease. We need a culture change. We're living in the past, so pretending it's 2009. We need a modern approach to football. I think you have that, by the way. I don't think that that's a struggle. The defense that you have is a modern approach to defense in football. The offensive playmakers that you got give you the talent to run the offense in that way. I think it's the play calling issue. But cool, we can argue that Dennis Allen's terrible, but Dennis Allen's not contributing to your losses. The offense is contributing to your losses. Dennis Allen doesn't run the offense. Now, if you want to argue fire Dennis Allen to then sign an offensive head coach, that's completely okay. But if we're talking about what's costing the team games right now, it's not Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen's not costing games right now. Now, if you want to replace Dennis Allen with an offensive-minded head coach in the offseason, I'm not going to argue against it if the Saints go 7-10 again. But I'm telling you, in terms of on tape, who's costing the games right now, today, it's not Dennis Allen. It's the offense. It's Pete Carmichael. Now, if this continues, fire everybody. But if we're talking about what can make this team win right now, I think the only real option is making a change at play calling. And that's the offensive play calling, right? That's the only real chance you have. Head's got to roll somewhere. And if you're going to roll and you think that you have a shot during the season, you need to make a change at play caller. That's what you got to do. You don't give up, right? You never tank. Only terrible teams tank. Tanking is bad. So we don't want to tank. Now, if you lose naturally and you suck, cool. J Live says, stop blaming Pete, it's Derek Carr. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Having studied Pete Carmichael for years, no, it's definitely Pete. Now, is Derek Carr playing at a high level? No, he's not. I'm not here to argue in defense of Derek Carr. But I am arguing that your biggest issue, the festering wound that is the New Orleans Saints team, is your offensive play calling. That is the massive issue. It is the mountain in front of molehills. Is Derek Carr playing as a top 10 quarterback? No, he is not. But that doesn't matter because he's also not playing as a bottom 10 quarterback. Issue is play calling. Issue is the fact that this team can't score in the red zone, and didn't do it last year either. The issue is that Pete Carmichael can come out with 15 pre-scripted plays and they work semi-well, hence the field goal drive, hence week 18 against Carolina, scoring a touchdown. And then he can't make adjustments in game. That is your big issue in New Orleans right now. The offensive play calling is not successful. Why on 3rd and 4 are you consistently calling plays that are 12-yard breaks for your receivers down the field? I'm wrong. J-Live, nothing on film says I'm wrong. You can still say that Derek Carr is playing, under expectations. He's not playing as the worst quarterback in the NFL. And you're definitely not going to have him look better with a bad play caller. And at the end of the day, you get to a point where the whole point of this Pete Carmichael opportunity starting last year was you had never really seen him outside the scope of Sean Payton and Drew Brees. And as we just discussed, Drew Brees' worst year came when Pete Carmichael was the only one in charge, but Drew Brees was still a Hall of Famer. Derek Carr is nowhere near Drew Brees, and none of us hopefully should have ever had the expectation that he was. But you now have 20-plus games of film and tendencies on Pete Carmichael, consistently showing he struggles to adjust and consistently showing that in game situations he cannot manage. He needs to sit back and game plan. That's what he does well. And that's what Sean Payton and Drew Brees said he did well. He's great at game planning. Hence why when you give him 20 minutes in a little session there in halftime, maybe he makes an adjustment and you come out a little bit better in the third quarter. But the reason you consistently struggle in the red zone, the reason that you struggle with 3 different quarterbacks, the reason this team does not score comes down to coaching. When you have an issue with an entire system, whether it be a positional system like offensive line, we've talked about Doug Marrone potentially being an issue here, or offensively, has to come back to coaching. Individual problems are fine, right? Derek Carr's not playing at a high level. He's not playing at the bottom. I mean, you can look up any analytic. He's not at the very bottom. He's not playing at a high level either. Doesn't matter who's the quarterback, though, when your play calling is trash. All of it is trash. Kyle says DC4 is not the issue. He's struggling because of the play calling and the O-line. I think that lends to it. I mean, we talked about the offensive line being a problem, right? Week 1, they gave up over 40% of the dropbacks were pressures. So obviously that's a significant issue. That was not the case in week 4. Now we can talk about his AC joint issue. That injury is real. But at the end of the day, I know I say stuff like this a lot, and I know I use by the end of the day a lot. Nobody puts an asterisk by a game saying, hey, he was this type of injury right here. Nobody does that. You don't asterisk the game. If you play, you're expected to play at a certain level. Just like coaching. If you coach, you're expected to call a game a certain way and score a certain amount of points and win. But right now, the New Orleans Saints offense is averaging about 13 points a game. Well, no, I'm sorry. If we take away special teams plays and defensive plays, it's actually averaging about 10 points a game, which is bottom of the NFL. That's coaching. Because it doesn't matter if you had Trevor Siemian in here. You're not getting worse than that. And that's definitely downgrading your quarterback. And unless you find a Hall of Fame quarterback to cover up your play calling deficiencies, which they don't exactly grow on trees, you need to change play calling. T-Rex says, it is not fair that DA got named head coach, but he can't get his own coaching staff. The offense sucks, especially in the red zone. Now, I won't say that he can't get his own coaching staff. I will add, I don't know all the particulars of the Pete Carmichael situation. But I do know that Pete Carmichael tried to step down, and then New Orleans didn't find anybody, and Pete Carmichael was thrust back into the offensive play calling and offensive coordinator role. I don't know what the reason is New Orleans doesn't have a new OC. Maybe it's nobody wants to come here. Maybe they don't believe in a new up-and-comer and they wanted a guy who has history. But no matter the reason, it's not working. And if it ain't working, it still falls on DA because he is the head coach. He's the head coach. Nick, he says, at what point would they actually fire or demote Pete Carmichael or Doug Marrone? What would it actually take? It's a fantastic question. And one I don't really have the answer to because I'm not in the facility. I mean, do I have opinions? Yeah. I think Pete Carmichael at this point has shown you enough. And what I mean by enough, he's shown you nothing good. Are there times where Pete Carmichael makes some good play calls? He is. Yeah, I mean, Pete Carmichael's best play calls were the beginning of the first half and the second half. Those are the best. You know, the pre-scripted ones. Those were the best. As soon as you got into situations where he needs to adjust in game, I feel like he struggles. And as I've said, I will review the film when it drops tonight, and you'll have a film study tomorrow focusing on Pete Carmichael's play calling. And maybe I am wrong. And if I'm wrong, I'll say I'm wrong. We're allowed to, in a post-game reaction, have some hot takes and have some opinions based on what we just saw. But there's nothing I've seen so far that makes me think that's the case. Elliot says Bieniemy wanted to come here. I don't know if he did or not, to be honest with you. There's a lot of Twitter talk everywhere, and it's tough to really confirm that. So we need to get rid of Carr. He's a loser. J-Live, the reason I can say confidently is I've watched Derek Carr and given film studies on Derek Carr. I can tell you Derek Carr's not the problem. Derek Carr's not the issue. Is Derek Carr playing elite? No. Would Derek Carr do a hell of a lot better with a better coach? Yes. Let me give you an example, by the way. We talked about how terrible last year Russell Wilson was, did we not? We laughed over here at how much Russell Wilson had fallen. Now, the defense for the Broncos is absolutely abysmal. But this year, Russell Wilson has dramatically improved, going from I'm a Hackett to Sean Payton. Now, we're not arguing that Sean Payton's an amazing coach in Denver and that the team is suddenly going to the Super Bowl. We are arguing that play calling greatly impacts QB play. Greatly impacts QB play. Russell Wilson is playing as a top 15, maybe top 10 quarterback statistically right now. And that's because of play caller change. That's what New Orleans needs, a play caller change. Now, the crappy part is you're not just going to go find an elite play caller, but you can at least get a better shot. At least get a better shot with Ronald Curry. At least you can try. At least you can try. Is Denver's defense worse than Rob Ryan's defense? I'll put it to you this way, Rainey. I'm not sure how much around the league you watch, but I'll read to you the stat line of Justin Fields, and then you tell me how bad Denver's defense is. Here's what Justin Fields did today in Chicago. Justin Fields ran the ball for 4 attempts and 25 yards. Hell, I'll put it on the screen for y'all. Y'all can see for yourself that Denver had to win a nail-biter. And yeah, I'm talking trash about Justin Fields. Justin Fields finished the day 28 of 35. That's 80% for 335 yards, 4 TDs, and 1 interception. And through 3 quarters, he was perfect. It wasn't until the very fourth, when Denver recaptured the lead, that some of those stats started to go down. Denver's defense is bad. Denver's defense is really bad. The Saints' offense is really bad too. Saints' offense is really bad too. If there's any silver lining from today, Atlanta loses to Jacksonville in London. They're going to fall and now be tied with New Orleans at 2-2. You look over at Minnesota. They ended up beating Carolina 21-13. So Carolina is 0-4 to start the season. And then obviously you lose to Tampa. Tampa goes to 3-1. New Orleans falls to 2-2. Snowdall says Saints talk all week about getting into manageable third downs. Then on 3rd down and 3, they're on all the receivers 20 yards down the field. Pretty obvious what the problem is, except to the Saints. My only hope is that something or someone smacks them upside the head and says, hey, listen, you got to make a move here. That's the only thing that I can really say there. You got to make a move. I don't know what else to say beyond that. You have to do something because it clearly isn't working. Clearly isn't working. You got a better quarterback situation. You got a better wide receiver room. You got a better running back room. Still doing bad. Remove all the variables that have changed. This is simple deduction. If you add in a new variable to fix something and it doesn't work, remove that variable. What's left? The only thing that hasn't changed is Pete Carmichael. Only thing that has changed is Pete Carmichael. J Live says poor Pete has to take blame for Derek Carr's shortcomings. Okay, J Live, what was your excuse then for Drew Brees, Andy Dalton, Jameis Winston, etc., all struggling with Pete Carmichael as a playmaker? If you dislike Derek Carr, that's fine. I'm not here to stand on top of a hill and say Derek Carr is a top play guy. He's not, never was, but he is a top 15, top 10 guy. Please explain to me how this is suddenly Derek Carr's fault and not Pete Carmichael, even though he's consistently proven that he's not been successful. Drew was hurt. Derek Carr's hurt. You can't do that. You can't sit here and scream Derek Carr sucked today when he had an AC joint sprain. No, sir. No, sir. That's not how that works. That is not how that works at all. This is why we stick to the film room. This is why we stick to the film room. Film tells all. Film speaks to how bad Pete Carmichael's play calling has been for going on 2 years now. Albiena says nothing is easy with Pete. Never get easy yardage. Every single play he calls seems to need someone making a great play for it to work. I'm in agreement. How can you blame the quarterback for play calls on 3rd and short going for 4 go routes? It really does feel like the man's trying to call 4 verts on a 3rd and 4, doesn't it? It really does. Lane says Alvin's 13 catches for 33 yards is insane. That is one of the most insane stat lines I've ever seen in my life. Again, that goes back to bad play design. It's a great example of bad play design. Because if Alvin Kamara were running the Texas concepts, the pivot whip routes, we talk about him running the wheel routes that we've known that he can run successfully, like the TD he got against Detroit, and what Andy Dalton threw in the ball last year, he would not be averaging 2 yards per reception. The only reason you average 2 yards per reception is Derek Carr. The only option he has is his check down, and playmaster caller Pete Carmichael said, hey, Alvin Kamara, go stand at the sideline 1 yard deep, which is exactly what most of his catches were. Stand at the 1 yard marker at the line of scrimmage and catch the ball. That is bad play design. If you have Alvin Kamara, who most would argue is your best playmaker, second to Chris Olave maybe, and his route is literally go stand at the sideline to catch a check down, that is bad play design. That is bad play design. And if we're picking out who the worst issue is here, we can put blame in a lot of places. Pete Carmichael, in my opinion, deserves the majority, the lion's share of that blame. J Live says Derek Carr was late as hell on his checkdowns. Again, J Live, I'd encourage you to watch our film studies because that's not what film has showed. Could that be the case today? Maybe. I don't have the all 22. It won't get released for another few hours. But film through 3 games did not show that's the case for Derek Carr. Not show that's the case for Derek Carr. Himmy says Carmichael is not a visionary. He isn't imaginative. With all the talent, you score 3 field goals and 0 TDs. It's pathetic. I tend to agree. And I don't think it gets better if you change quarterback unless you manage to nab Patrick Mahomes. But this is the difficulty of this team. And again, this is not absolving the sins of others, right? Derek Carr has not played a blameless 4 games at all. I'm simply saying he's not your primary problem. Who do we blame for the lack of pass rush? Great question, Ricky. And this is going to come back into the film room when we get into it tonight. That'll probably be maybe my second film study of the week. We'll see. Tomorrow's is going to focus on play calling to see if what I'm saying and what I believe is right. But you're going to blame that on twist stunt game maybe failing. You're going to blame that on individual matchups, lack of adjustment. It did improve in the second half, but that's a while to wait, and it clearly wasn't the answer. You're done with them? You could be done with them, J-Live. I don't have the luxury of being done with anybody. As an evaluator, you don't have the luxury of just being done and throwing your hands up. You have to study every play, every game, several times. And I guess all I can say is y'all better be happy you don't have to do my job, which is break down the tape. Oh, man. Derek Carr's been guilty of mistakes week in and week out. Of course, Terrell. Again, and this goes back to expectations, right? When I look at a quarterback like Derek Carr or even a Baker Mayfield, I expect mistakes every game. I go in with an expectation of mistakes. But that's because I don't see him as a top 5 guy. There are very few players in this league at their position that I expect them to go blameless week in and week out. Derek Carr's not one of those guys. Derek Carr, again, he's being paid as the 13th highest paid quarterback in the NFL, which means he's barely being paid as an above average guy. Obviously, the Saints don't have an expectation of him to be blameless either because they're not paying him to be a blameless quarterback. But they are paying Pete Carmichael to be a good OC. He ain't doing that. He ain't doing that. So I don't know why Carr is holding the ball so long. We've gone over that in a few different film studies. A lot of times it's play calling. There are some opportunities that Carr has where he doesn't call. And remember, I did a whole segment on Twitter last week about pull the trigger for Derek Carr. Don't get me wrong. There are opportunities there sometimes. But generally, you wonder why the ball gets held so long. This comes back into scheming and play calling. This is why the all-22 is so important. So you have different drop depths as a quarterback, 3, 5, 7, and even a 9-step drop depth, which all is designed around timing. So when you notice a lot with Pete Carmichael's plays, especially some of these third and shorts, he's calling plays that are designed to take 5, 7-step drop times, which are up to 3 or more seconds of route development. It means he's calling plays that the wide receiver does not create a break until 10, 12 yards down the field. That takes longer to complete. So that's going to look like a guy's holding the ball longer, but that's a play calling issue. Versus maybe they run a sail concept, which is a 3-layer concept to the one side of the field that has low, mid, and high reads. One thing that Sean Payton used to love to do in New Orleans was triangle reads. You're not seeing that with Pete Carmichael. You don't see the verity. You don't see, as a lot of people like to call it, the imagination. Are there times where Derek Carr holds the ball? Of course. He's not a top quarterback. But is the issue his fault or more issue somewhere else? There's blame to go around. The lion's share seems to be Pete Carmichael. Hypothetically, do you think Drew could call an offense? I do. Yeah. I think Drew could call an offense. I don't know where Drew's at in terms of the ability to create an offense and design it, but I think that Drew could call an offense. I'd love to see Drew get into that realm and start working his way in that. I think he has the mind for it. I don't think he could come in and do it like this year, but I think he has the mind for it. So, Bucs played deep shell all game long, and Saints' only answer was dump to AK, which the Bucs are ready for. And see, Wayne, this kind of goes back to the issue, right? When you see a lot of what this team was facing in terms of what the offense was facing, they basically said, we don't believe that you can beat us, underneath. You can't beat us with yards after catch, play designs. We're just going to play and take away your consistent routes. And this is why I use the word tendency so often, because this is what Carmichael does. He consistently calls the same plays, same depths, game in, week out. Examples of things that he could do better. A staple of the Sean Payton offense was the Hank concept to one side of the field to create a pressure point to open up a first down. Another thing that he used to use a lot when he was in New Orleans. I know I'm bringing up Sean Payton and we're all supposed to have moved on from him, but to give you a relatively amazing Saints mind or Saints reference of how well things can be, in these situations, you would see him start using concepts like mesh concepts when they would try to creep underneath with that underneath man coverage, mesh concepts to create rub routes, scissor concepts in the red zone to force a one-on-one situation for your guy. We have not seen that play happen with Pete Carmichael. It comes down to situational play calling. The things that made Sean Payton great were not his ability to draw a 0 and a square and show you how a play should work. His amazingness of it being in New Orleans, why Sean Payton was good, is because each situation he knew a way to take advantage of a defense and call better plays. Pete Carmichael does not. That's the issue. That's the issue. The fact that you're not seeing these concepts, the fact that you're seeing the same drag crossing pattern for Michael Thomas 15 yards deep consistently in these play situations instead of variants like double hitch routes or, a slew of plays that I could show you from the Saints offensive playbooks of years past that he's not calling. Situational play calling is the Saints' biggest issue, in my opinion. That is the biggest issue. So, no concepts from Pete, just run and gun. I mean, they're running a West Coast offense, but it feels so shallow. It feels so empty. There's no imagination into it. And the only times you see Pete Carmichael get imaginative are the pre-scripted plays. Like the little reverse pop pass attempt. Sure, it went for -6 yards, but I like that in the first drive. You're trying to show some imagination, some variety. Show them something they clearly did not prepare for. But then you just went back into doing nothing afterwards. So anyway, we're going to go into the film this week. We're going to hit it really hard. And I'm going to try to answer as many of y'all's questions as I can because that's what I love to do. I love New Orleans Saints football, and I love the Who Dat Nation. It's the best fandom of all sports, and I've gotten to travel and do a lot of work with a lot of different places. Saints are amazing. But we're going to jump into that tomorrow. and cover it. 992 says Carr also has fault. No. Again, and this is something, I'm not saying I have a gripe with you, 992, but I do have this gripe with fans in general. And this is any sport, any fandom. You got to understand that it's not black and white, good, bad. There is a spectrum. I am not saying Derek Carr does not make mistakes. He does. But it's like fans tend to only see greatness or throw everything away. And there is a middle ground that 98% of players of any sport fall in, where they are not great, but they're not trash. Derek Carr is right there. You have to work within that realm, because you don't just have Hall of Famers falling off trees. So that doesn't mean Derek Carr doesn't make mistakes. And it doesn't mean we don't give Derek Carr grief when he makes mistakes. But the biggest issue, like the most massive issue on the spectrum, is play calling. That's the biggest issue. That's why guys like Russell Wilson can go having to their career worst year, looking despicably bad. Russell Wilson last year, 16 TDs to 11 touchdowns. You know how many TDs he's thrown so far through 4 games? 9 with Sean Payton. His completion percentage has gone up like 6 or 7%. Play calling makes a difference for mid-tier quarterbacks. Derek Carr is a mid-tier quarterback. The only way to elevate Derek Carr is to have a better than trash offensive play caller. Derek Carr is not talented enough to elevate himself. Another example to give you. Remember the days of Devery Henderson and Robert Meacham and guys like that who would go to play for other teams but not be elite receivers. But when they were with Drew, they were elite. Same concept. You can be a mid-tier guy and somebody else elevates your play. Drew Brees had the ability to elevate people's play. Sean Payton has the ability to elevate people's play with his play calling. Pete Carmichael does not. Derek Carr is not that guy. He just is what he is. An above average, right around top 15 QB that if you put bad play calling with is going to look bad. If you put good play calling with, he's going to be better. Simple as that. There's a middle ground there, and that's where the Saints are, and that's why I'm so critical on play calling, because of I feel like, realistic expectations of Derek Carr. So, if they don't fire Pete, dig out the old paper bags. I don't think that they'll lose every game because the team's just simply too talented for that. But I do think that if Pete Carmichael remains, after me watching, 21 games of Pete Carmichael calling plays, I do not see the Saints winning a positive record with Pete Carmichael as a play caller. It doesn't matter who you have come in. And if all of y'all want to just tank for Caleb Williams, I'm going to tell you right now, Caleb Williams is going to look terrible too if Pete Carmichael's calling the plays. You've got 24-ish games now of Carmichael in recent 3 to 4 year history. I think it's pretty obvious it's not working. But that's just my opinion. Following the day, let's go ahead and wrap it up. I appreciate all of y'all. Y'all all amazing. We're all part of the same fandom. We're all part of the same family. So no matter if you're frustrated, no matter if you're happy, we always got each other. It's one thing that makes the Who Dat Nation so amazing. Appreciate all of y'all. Make sure you check back here for the film study tomorrow. I'll also be live on Bleacher Report's app, so check out the Bleacher Report app, covering up some of the things that I see in evaluation and grading tomorrow as well. So check that out if you haven't already, and if you plan to. Who Dat, God bless. I'll catch y'all all in Tuesday's film study, tomorrow's film study and Tuesday's podcast. Who Dat, God bless. Deuces, that's me. Catch you on the next one. We outie.